Welcome to The Social Chase. I am your host, Chase Taylor. The following show is a discussion of police interaction with individuals on the autism spectrum. Cyndi Cruz contacted my mother, Helen Taylor, to discuss her providing police training in her town of Wallingford. Of course, they are friends and started having further discussions about her positive experience reaching out to the Wallingford Police Department. This conversation about the value of having a positive conversation with officers prompted the Help Us Help You concept. Today, I'm going to introduce my mother, Helen Taylor, and Cyndi Cruz, who, based on a conversation about police safety, came up with this idea with the local police department. Cyndi Cruz is the mother of Justin, who's on the autism spectrum like me. Today's guests are Donna Cohen, parent advocate, has a 29-year-old daughter diagnosed with autism and intellectual and development disabilities. Mike DeFosses, parent advocate of two teenage sons on the spectrum. Chief Fred Spagnolo Jr., Waterbury Chief of Police. Chief Vern Riddick, West Hartford Chief of Police. Lieutenant Mike Connolly Wethersfield, Patrol Division Commander. Justin and I joined. It was a great, open, and transparent conversation about meltdowns, wandering, crisis intervention training, interactions with officers. Enjoy the show.
Welcome everybody to the Social Chase program. I'm very excited today. We have some wonderful guests, and the guests are going to have a discussion about us help you, and Police Autism Forum, which is not only about how police officers can interact with our children, but how we can help officers interact with our children as well. So it goes both ways. So I'm very excited. My co-host today is Cyndi Cruz, and we started this conversation. Cyndi contacted me regarding police training, which I offered in the Waterbury, thanks to the first Chief Vern Riddick, who gave me the opportunity to spread awareness and wandering and safety regarding autism in Waterbury, and it's branched out to the state. I'm now certified with the state, and thanks to Chief Spagnolo, who actually continued on to support me in that effort to volunteer my time to spread awareness about autism. So I'm very grateful to my city of Waterbury. They've been so supportive of me. And so Cyndi knew I did the training. She contacted me, and we were going to do a training, but she was telling me about Lieutenant Mike Connolly. And I was saying, wow, that's what light bulb went off in my head, saying, let's do a forum. We need to share this information with everybody about how awesome our officers are. And so that's how this all started. So I would like to introduce Cyndi Cruz, my co-host for today. Welcome, Cyndi.
Hi, everyone. And hi, Helen. Thank you for doing this with me today. A little bit about myself. I am a mom of 3. My children are 24, soon to be 21, and 16. And my son, Justin, is on the autism spectrum. And my mission here for Justin is to make sure that he has everything he needs, to be successful in life, including self-advocacy, because, that's been really hard for him in the past. And I want to make sure that he learns how to advocate for himself whenever he is, going through a challenging time or what have you. But especially, if for some reason he's in a sticky situation and is in an encounter with a police officer, and I want him to feel safe and know that he can approach officers, ask them for help and for questions, but also know how to conduct himself if for some reason, a call is made, regarding my son. And so today, I think, as Helen said, the purpose is to kind of learn from each other. What can we learn from the police officers? What can we learn to help our children be prepared should they encounter a situation where they have to interact with a police officer? And also, what can we learn from you, and how can we help you make your jobs easier as well, and learn about the autism community. I'd also like to take a moment to introduce our panel for today. So we have Helen Taylor, who is a parent advocate and has a son, Chase, who is 21 and is on the autism spectrum. We have myself and my son, Justin, who, like Chase, will hopefully be joining us in a little bit. Also, Donna Cohen is here today, and she is a parent and advocate, and her daughter is 29 years old and was diagnosed with autism and intellectual and developmental disabilities. Mike DeFosses is a parent and advocate as well, and he and his wife have two teenage sons on the spectrum, and I believe they are in middle school right now. Well, not right now, but meaning they're in middle school. And also we have Chief Fred Spagnolo, who is the Waterbury police chief, as well as Chief Vern Riddick of West Hartford. He's the police chief as well. And Lieutenant Mike Connolly here from Wethersfield PD. And Officer Bobby Harris from Groton. He actually has a 25-year-old son also on the autism spectrum, and he is a police trainer for autism awareness. So welcome everyone, and thank you for being a part of today's panel.
Thank you so much, Cyndi, for introduction. Bobby Harris may have been out on a call, so he's not here right now, but maybe we could catch up with him later to have this discussion with him a little bit further. So Cyndi, when we were talking about your son, Justin, and how your concerns about him having certain meltdowns or his interactions with police officers. So can you share a little bit of your concerns? And of course, the panel at any time could go ahead and chime in and what they feel and what they think.
Yes, thank you, Helen. So, so my son, Justin, is 21. He, one of the concerns I have, my biggest concern is that Justin is considered to be high functioning on the autism spectrum. So if you see Justin, you wouldn't necessarily identify him as someone on the spectrum. But what people don't know, most people don't know that he is on the spectrum. And so my worry is that if he is in a situation, let's say at school or at work, or, at a store or something, and he should have a meltdown, what is that going to look like for others or to others? And what will happen if the authorities are called and he is approached by a police officer? My biggest concern is that they will see him while he is having a meltdown. For him, a meltdown could be crying, literally crying like a child, or he could be angry. And so it really, you don't know what you're going to get. And I just worry for my son, like what will happen? How will officers respond? How will they even know that he has autism? And he has disclosed to his employer, so they are aware, but that doesn't mean that everyone that works with him knows. So, I'd love to know, like, what, one of the chiefs or Lieutenant Mike Connolly think about that, and what recommendations would you have for me to share with Justin on what to do if he is in a situation where he's unsure of himself and the police are there?
All right, thank you, Chief.
Okay, so thanks, Cyndi. Thanks, Helen, for putting this forum together. I think it's super important. And, you're right, Chief Riddick brought you into the fold for training here in Waterbury. Seems like yesterday, but it was quite a few years ago now. And it was a great thing. And we had a good response from our officers, and we continue that training today. And we're actually looking at even some more trainings, regarding autism awareness through a company called Positive Behavior Supports, and they provide a autism awareness training for law enforcement officers specific to patrol officers to identify some of the things that I'm sure we're going to talk about in this forum today, and even some of the things that Cindy's bringing up now. So I think that training is a really important component, and not just training once in the police academy or as a basic recruit, but recurring training on a yearly or biannually basis, where officers can be reminded of recognition of autism, some situational cues they can pick up on, and all the differences with folks that do have autism around the spectrum. Another thing that we've done in Waterbury that I think is super helpful is we've created a vulnerable citizens database. This is something, again, that was created way back when. I believe it was Captain Larry Hunter that came up with the idea. And frankly, I don't remember if Chief Riddick was the chief or not, but I do remember when it first came about, and it was something that we pushed hard through our community relations division. We pushed it at any and all community events. Actually had a lot of assistance and help from Helen, our #1 advocate out here in Waterbury, and getting the information out. And it's a huge benefit to us as police officers and certainly police administrators, but also to the families. So in a situation, Cindy, such as yours, if you were your son or was registered on that vulnerable citizens registration, that's information that police officers would have prior to responding to a call. To understand that your son has been identified as a vulnerable citizen, and what his situation may be, and I think that is super helpful. In police work, it's super helpful in life to have as much information as possible, but it's especially super helpful when police officers are equipped with a lot of information before they're going into a situation. So I think there's some other things that have been talked about in the past, like some potential identification marker. There's folks that have medical bracelets for all sorts of varieties of issues, and whether they're diabetic or epileptic. So I think that that's something that really should be talked about and considered. I don't know how folks feel about that as far as maybe a stigma attached to it, but I think in my mind, I'm the type of person where safety overcomes all of that. So that's where my head's at.
Yeah. So let me add to that, Chief. So you're very right about that. From the parent's perspective, some of their children don't want anybody to know they have autism. But it's very important for parents to understand that them identifying themselves as having autism makes it a better situation overall for the police officer and that individual. And so I think that is key. Mike, did you want to add to what Cindy was saying? Like, what should Justin do when he encounters an officer and he's having this meltdown? What other steps that you might think you can offer?
Justin? Which Mike? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Lieutenant. The Lieutenant. I'm sorry.
Okay. No worries. The training is so important to law enforcement, and as the chief said, it's not just a one-time deal. Like you need constant refreshing, but you need to have patience, and you need to recognize I don't want to get too far into the weeds, but we do trainings. A lot of our officers do what's called CIT, which is crisis intervention training. It's an extra 2 weeks that they would go, and it delves into patience, voice, that kind of stuff. But I just think one of the biggest things to say it again is not just jump into conclusions, it's patience. Sometimes you got to let people air out and vent, and And, you know, unless there's an immediate threat as far as, you know, maybe you're out in the middle of the road or somewhere where there's a dangerous situation and you have room, I mean, I think we have time to slow things down, wait, talk softly, friendly, and not just jump in and all of a sudden put our hands in or scare anyone or that kind of thing. I don't know.
So that's correct. So if you interact with a person on the spectrum and you do something quickly, they might get scared and run off and run right into the road, regardless of their age. Sometimes they still don't have fear of traffic or understand it. And so that's very true. Quick movements are an issue with some of the individuals on the spectrum. I like to add back, so in terms of advocacy from parents, the Vulnerable Citizens was a forum online, which was great. Having conversations with Chief Riddick, it became a database. And that's, and we, in a database where we could submit pictures. And so now there's a picture that an officer will see when they go to a call or something along those lines. So that was one of the great additions. We're working with the chief. And I'm saying that is because it's just me, little old me, I'm a parent. And so it's just a conversation some parents need to have sometimes with your local officers and how we can help each other out. So that's why I'm pointing that out a little bit regarding that. So Cyndi, was there anything else before we go to Donna?
No, I think that's it, Helen.
Okay. So Donna, how about you share a little bit about your expectations or your worries or your good stories, if you want, regarding your daughter?
Sure. So our daughter is 29, but really sort of toddler preschoolish. She actually loves police officers because, you know, Barney and Sesame Street, and they teach all the good stuff. And that's not her fear at all. Like, she would be so excited. So I suppose that's a potentially positive thing. But my real concern when we go out in the community is that her behaviors are unpredictable, and she can be loud, not in an angry way, just in general. She's a sort of likes to talk about Barney and Sesame Street a lot, and it sort of throws people off a little bit, I think, because she looks like she's 29, not 6. And the things that concern me are, for example, let's say we're in line and she sees her very favorite M&Ms and she really wants those M&Ms, and she'll eye them for a while, and I can be standing right next to her. But if somebody might go to get that last M&M, there's a good chance she's getting in there and she's going to grab those M&Ms from whoever this poor lady or guy is who attempted to get them. So now I have always this weird, uncomfortable feeling, even though I can certainly explain for her, I'm so sorry. Here, let me try and get the M&Ms from her hand and give them to you, and so forth. And maybe I can and maybe I can't. But my bigger concern is that somebody will take it in a really bad way. And they might call the police because she pushed them, or she, you know, certainly put her hands on them in some way. And so rightfully so, that person would be upset. My concern is what happens once the police come, because she will yes the person no matter what they ask her, probably, or it could be no, but usually it's yes, because she wants to please. So if somebody says, you know, did you hurt this person? Yes. Did you hit this person? Yes. Did you, you know, but you could also say, is the sun orange or purple or blue? And she'll say yes. So she's not going to give proper answers. And then I'm trying to figure out, how do I handle that? Like, do I just sort of intervene and say, well, just so you know, blah, 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 blah. Or do I just let it, I'm not sure what to do, is what I'm saying. And it's my huge concern. I have such visions of not good things ending up happening. So that's what I want to know.
So Chief Riddick, do you want to add to that at all?
Yeah, Donna, thank you for sharing your story. I appreciate that in that scenario. And I think with my colleagues here, we would hope, we can't guarantee that most of our officers, if they were to respond, would be able to ascertain that your daughter did not have the proper mental capacity to commit a crime. And we would work it out and provide, with, especially if you're there. I'm not sure I can envision a scenario where you wouldn't be there in a store, but that could happen, or someone else. So I would doubt very seriously that your daughter would be charged, or excuse me, arrested. It would be more of working something out at that time, getting her the proper services if you were unable to provide that, and going forward. I think the bigger issue would be, and which is something we can talk about here, is prior to us getting there and the person that may or may not have been struck prior to us getting there. I think that's the bigger issue, where your intervention or whoever's with your daughter has to get involved and explain quickly. You had mentioned you weren't sure if you wanted to intervene. I would recommend, yes, hey, just so you know, my child's on the spectrum, she has autism, whatever the case is. And I think that will help de-escalate immediately what's going on with that. And I know I'm going to talk about CIT later, so I'll wait, but that's just a really abbreviated answer. I'm not sure.
Thank you. That's actually very reassuring to me. I'm a nervous mom, and I mean, I know she's 29. I should be used to this by now, but the truth is I'm not. And I worry about her like literally every moment of every day. So for me to hear that, it is very reassuring.
And if I could add to that as well. Oh, go ahead, Chief.
I just wanted to add to that and just back up Chief Riddick. It's so important, that you advocate for your daughter, prior to police response, but especially when police get there. And the people that you're dealing with in that situation may not be willing to listen to you, but I have to believe, and I do wholeheartedly believe, that police officers will be more than willing to listen to you and appreciate that information, because it'll help them make a more informed decision and handle the call in a much better way. So I think it's super important that you speak loudly about that situation.
So Chief, well, while you're on, not muted yet.
Yeah.
So one of the things I do teach during the training is that we say, make sure the caretaker's involved, because that individual on the spectrum only knows who that caretaker is. They do not know who the officer is. And so it's important for that caretaker, unless they're the problem, to be involved and to help out the officer as much as possible. So I always say, sometimes I know they say, step back, ma'am, we have a situation here, but like you're saying, that we're hoping that the officers realize when a parent's saying, I have a special needs individual or adult or child, that they'll understand that they should listen to us, because we may be the only one to calm that individual down. So I do appreciate that. Thank you, Donna, for sharing.
Thank you.
So as I was discussing training, so with my training, one of the key things that I do talk about is wandering. Our individuals on the spectrum just love to wander. We've had certain situations where they wander out the house. A recent one happened when they wandered out the house, went down the road, and it was somebody else's pool, and the mother did not know that that person was gone. And sometimes our children, we think they're safe somewhere else, and we think they're fine, and we're not paying attention to that. And next thing we know, we get a knock at our door. And they do wander to water for some reason. Individuals on the spectrum love water, and there's been very tragic situations where they have drowned. A high percentage of them will drown from wandering. And one of the other situations that they also like to wander towards railroad tracks. And so they'll stand right in the middle of the road in a train track, looking at the train saying, wow, this train looks so nice, and stand right in front of a train track that's moving, as well as elevators. So these certain things that they're geared to go towards, we as parents have to be conscientious of it and try to make sure that they understand that wandering to those areas may be dangerous to them. So, that's our due diligence. And sometimes if we have a wanderer, we have to put certain locks on the door. And maybe that one day we didn't have the lock on the door and they happened to wander out. We had a situation with Chase when we were in Florida, and I thought my husband was in the front room with him, and he thought that he was in the back room with us, and he had wandered out of my mother's house. We didn't know where he was until we finally thought, let's go check the park. And there he was, calmly. He was 3 years old. Before we knew he had autism, going down the slide, happy as could be, while we're like frantic looking for him. So for some reason, they like to wander. And I asked Chase recently, I said, so do you remember that? Do you remember why you wandered? He's like, yeah, I just wanted to go somewhere. Not thinking about anything else. They don't think about anything else but what they want to do. So I want to talk to Mike, who has 2 sons on the spectrum in middle school right now, about what your fears are wandering, maybe some certain encounters with the officers, and if you could share some of your concerns.
Great. Hey there, Mike DeFosses. I have 2 boys, Jake and Tyler, 13. They're going into 8th grade. And am I on, Helen? Sorry. Thank you. One of the things about wandering, just to give I just wanted to give a tip that if you need to get somebody on the spectrum's attention and get them to come to you and possibly be calmer, carry an iPad. They love iPads. You show them an iPad, hey buddy, look at this, and it'll help diffuse them. It'll bring them closer to you. And I'm just keep one in the car. An iPhone, same thing, but the iPad's even better. I do worry about my kids wandering off at times. I don't know exactly. I haven't really had too many thoughts because I'm always with them. So, but there are times when they'll wander off in a store and I have 2 going in 2 different directions. So that's usually, they're going to the cereal aisle. They want to see all the fun, colorful cereals. So I usually know where to find them, but it is scary. You know, sometimes you just don't know who might have encountered them and what's going on. And they can't really walk around all the time with an iPad around them, you know. One thing I did want to mention, being pulled over. Maybe you were speeding, maybe you went right on red and you get pulled over. The child in the back, there might be so much tinting that you're not even sure there's anyone else in the car. And then as a parent in the passenger seat, I mean, you know, in the driver's seat, you're not sure exactly how your child's going to react. They might be pretty calm and then it might escalate, but they might cry, they might bang their head against the window, you start kicking or screaming, and you know, there could be, I need to get out of the car and open the other door and help calm them down. So that's kind of a sticky situation. What do you do? Because the officer may not exactly know who's in the back seat and what the situation is, and you know, things go so quickly sometimes and you're in a panic. And I just kind of wanted to know, what could I do better? Or I don't know. I just kind of makes me nervous at that with that one.
Okay.
We're gonna give Mike a shot.
You want to go, Vern? Okay, so you know, listen, I think that right, there's a lot of anxiety when somebody's pulled over by the police, right? Inherently, it's not a fun feeling. You feel like something's gone wrong, right? So you know that level's already there, and you know, I'm a believer that you know people play off of each other's vibes and feelings. So I'm sure that you know your children are gonna feel your anxiousness and the situation, and probably you're right. You're more likely than not you're gonna have a situation to deal with one of your sons or maybe even both of your sons. And the officer is just you know trying to do their job at that point and collect information, and you know I wish it was a different world and I could tell you all that nobody ever lies to us, but everybody always lies to us. So you know there's a lot of skepticism when people just abruptly move out like you're talking about, say, officer, I need to help my child, they're in the back of the car, and the officer's like, whoa, let's wait a minute. So you know I guess my advice, as hard as it would be to try to maintain, you know, some stability yourself, and that might transfer over to your children, and just give the officer a minute to you know try to assess the situation and allow everything to work the way it's supposed to. and just kind of work together and communicate, you know, and get those kids calmed down. Because the last thing you want is an argument or you know, escalating the officer's actions because you know, he feels or she feels that you're not complying with what, you know, what the officer wants you to do, and, you know, creating a more dangerous situation for everybody. So it's tough. It's a tricky situation that you bring up. But I think, you know, barring like a true emergency, a serious emergency, you know, just give it that little bit of time that it needs for everybody to figure it out. I mean, if there's a situation where your child is hurting themselves, then, you know, you're going to have to, and I'm hoping that the officer, if you can roll the window down and the officer can see what's going on, you can explain, my child has autism. He's, you know, I'm fearful that he's hitting his head against the window. I'm fearful he's going to hurt himself. You know, please help. The officer may, you know, by virtue of their training, reach in and try to calm your child down as well. That may not work. It may make the situation worse. But at that point, I think, you know, it'll be a green light for you to get involved and try to help out. But, you know, it's they're tricky situations, and there's not, you know, it's not cookie cutter. There's no book. That's why I think, you know, the training we talked about, you know, Lieutenant Connolly mentioned it, Chief Riddick mentioned it, it's so important. You know, one of the components, one of the reasons I like this new PBS training is because it incorporates some role playing into some of the autism awareness. And I think that's important because, you know, we can talk about it all you want, you can read about it all you want, we can take, you know, multiple choice tests all we want and get hundreds on them, but until we try to apply it, we don't know if we actually can do it, right? We can understand it and comprehend it all the time, but it doesn't always transfer over to what's supposed to be done. So yeah, that's you know, that's a great scenario that you talk about. It's something that, you know, I'm certainly going to recommend that we discuss. But I guess recapping, roll the window down, try to stay as calm as you can, try to explain the situation. If you're comfortable in giving it time, that's fine. If it's an emergency, then, you know, make sure you address that, you know, verbalize it. Again, the more information the officer can collect and the more information the officer can verify by seeing, the easier the whole situation is going to be for, you know, for him or her. And I think ultimately the better the communication will be between all the parties.
All right, thank you. Also, just to reiterate that it can be so confusing for all that are involved at that time that it's just something I want people to know, and officers to know that, you know, it's tough sometimes to say something is going on here in the back or to roll the window down. And it's, anyway, I just,
Yeah. I have to say that, yeah.
I just wanted to make sure that I really enjoyed your answer. Thank you.
Yeah. So I know what you're saying, Mike, that during that time, sure, Vern, just one second, during that time where our minds are racing, we're figuring out, but now with the chief saying that, that's in my head now. So that might be in your head now that you might actually click and say, well, you know what? I remember what the chief said to me. Let me roll this window down, etc. So great advice, Chief. I appreciate that. One of the things that I also teach during the training is that our individuals on the spectrum have sensory issues. And so the flashing lights and the sirens make it worse for them when they hear all this. So sometimes I try to say, if possible, as long as it's not dangerous, to turn off the lights or turn off the sirens, because if those are still going, that person's not going to calm down. Those lights are like lightning bolts going through individuals on the spectrum's eyes, or the sound is like a train going through their head. So just imagine how you would feel in that type of situation. So that's one of the things I do give as an advice, that if possible, turn off the lights and turn off the sirens if possible. Chief Riddick, you were going to say something?
I just want to add on to Mike. Thank you for sharing your concern. We have a saying in law enforcement: if it's predictable, it can be preventable, or you can take ways of mitigating it. And I would ask you, all these scenarios that you're thinking about, play them out yourself. Just as we do this scenario-based training for our personnel, you need to do the same thing for yourself. And one thing that really triggered me, and actually made my heart skip, is when you mentioned that, you know, you might be in a panic. You of all people cannot panic. because if you're there, you will be that person, that conduit for us, to your loved one, as well as to us, to law enforcement. So you have to remain calm. And if you know in advance, if you put yourself through these scenarios, just like we do with training, you'll be surprised how you'll click into your training during the real life situation, and you'll actually be calm because you've gone through this scenario or something close to it in your mind previously.
So I guess part of the panic that I was talking about was my panic of my child having a crazy meltdown in the back. Yeah, I understand. I need to stay calm. I get that, and try to say what's going on while I'm panicking how my child's going to react to the lights or siren or just the fact of what's happening. So I don't. It's a tough one. You don't always know what the child's going to do, and it could be. I don't know. It's just
So-
it's hard to know sometimes.
It is hard, but Chief Riddick is also making a good point. And I do this myself. I do certain situations, something bad, I do scenarios in my head. So when it happens, I can handle it a certain way. So that's something that we as parents, it may not be easy, but that's something that we can do, like the what ifs. What if this were to happen? How would I react? Because the more we practice that in our head, the more natural it will be and better for everyone in this situation. One of the things that a father did share with me is that he was pulled over and his son is a larger kid, and he was like making noises, and the officer was trying to talk to the son in the back of the car. Of course, this didn't happen in Waterbury, so it was a different town. But that's some of the thing too, is that with officers seeing somebody behaving that way, we're hoping that they're going to get trained and say, let's not talk to the person in the back that's having certain behaviors. Let's talk to the person that we're pulling over. And I think with the training that's been going on, I think that's starting to change more and more. Right. Okay. So
Helen, I wanted to add something really quick too. Just as a suggestion, especially for the parents. One of the things that I picked up when I visited Wethersfield PD for the first time were the blue envelopes.
Yeah.
I think they were originally created for drivers who are on the autism spectrum, or so that if you are pulled over and they say license and registration, and you can hand this blue envelope over to the officer, and that would have your registration and insurance cards inside. My son has a permit. He doesn't have his license yet. That is a goal of his. But if and when one of us gets pulled over, whether it's my husband, myself, or our other son who drives, and Justin is in the car, if the officer says, oh, license, registration, if for whatever reason something's happening and we're all nervous and worked up because maybe Justin is scared or anxious, whatever, they'll know just by handing that envelope. I've written on there, passenger Cyndi Cruz is on the spectrum. So if nothing else, that officer better be, in order to access the insurance and the registration, hopefully, I'm pretty sure they're reading the face of the envelope to see that. So that if I say, oh, my son, here, it's written on the envelope, at least that'll be like another identifying thing for them to know, okay, maybe let me go back to the training that I received and, maybe handle this particular situation a little differently. That might help being an identifying thing for the officers to recognize, that there is someone in the car that might be on the spectrum, or that is on the spectrum. It could be the driver or the passenger.
that's a great tip, because the focus was more for individuals on the spectrum would have those envelopes in their car. But I never thought about the parent also having that
Yes.
in the car as well. So I think that's a great tip. So Chief Riddick and Spagnolo and Lieutenant Connolly, are those envelopes available in the stations yet?
Yes.
Yeah, we have them. And just to add real quick, Cyndi, by reading that and stepping back, our officer is going to look at that, and there's, you know, they should understand that, okay, now I got to slow things down a lot more, and maybe talk clearly, and, you know, say, hey, you know, okay, I understand, you know, just reassuring that everyone in the car is, hey, everything's going to be okay, we're going to get through this, but that we do know without having to say it. I can, you know, if you can't say it or don't want to say it,
Right.
you know, in words, but you're saying it with the card.
So I just want to go, before you go send to Chief Riddick, I want to go back to Donna for a minute, because I was thinking more about this. So one of the situations that you said is your daughter loves police officers. So in that situation, sometimes individuals on the spectrum, they love the police officers that they'll go in their space and not know they have to keep a certain space with them. So she might like their hat and want to take their hat and put it on, or she might like the badge and try to grab the badge. Some, not your daughter, but some individuals on the spectrum love guns, and they might want to grab the gun. So if one of the officers could share with us, or the chief can share with us, is what's the best way to mitigate that if they're coming towards you, to keep that space for the individual. And sometimes they're so engaged that that's all they want and that's all they're seeing. What advice can you give to us parents to teach our children, like, we know you like these things, but this is something that can happen, or something along those lines? Any tips for that?
Actually, I'm gonna throw it. Oh, go ahead, Mike.
No, Chief,
I
don't, you
Nope.
sure?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Helen, I understand that, and there's gonna be times when it's gonna be, well, I have to figure out in the moment, you know. You know, if you're working with someone who's, you know, 350 pounds and 6'5", you know, you obviously don't want to struggle with someone like that, but you know, there's ways of turning and presenting ourselves. And we back to the what Chief Riddick said, Donna, with your daughter, you know, I would hope that if there is a parent there, or a guardian, that they would tell us, okay? If not, that we as an officer are gonna understand the clues or cues that they're giving off, that hey, there might be someone on the spectrum, or maybe some other health concerns. But I mean, in my almost 24 years here, you know, I've run into people that are curious about things. And I mean, for me, I've always tried to maybe do a distraction, like maybe pull something off, or point to the badge, or turn and show my patch, or start talking. And maybe just like a diversion type thing. Like I know what I'm capable of. I know my firearm is secured in the side, and there become levels of retention. How, you know, the firearm is going to come out. I don't believe someone's going to pull my gun out of my holster that easily unless they have experience and training. So, I mean, to all of a sudden jump back and start getting excited, I mean, obviously that's probably the worst thing we could do. So, I mean, good thinking on your feet, which we cops tend to do. Maybe thinking just of a diversion of some sort, if it's that, or maybe, hey, you know, hands up, okay, you know, like that kind of thing, and just talking slowly and surely, and you know, I carry like cards in my pocket, and, you know, thinking just outside the box right now, maybe take out and give a business card so they can look at it, and then maybe we could start making some headway of, all right, now we're slowing things down. You know,
I like it. The distractions are good.
I said it before, and I know Chief Riddick is here we go. Everyone has their ways, right? Like I don't have a problem with even the touch. Like it's just me. I can always work with that. I don't mind touching someone if it works, but I'm also not going to just all of a sudden put my hands out and be like, ah. But I've always felt that I've handled those situations well by just the things that we talked about. Certainly anything can go, you know, sideways, but you know, most officers now, with the training and the training that's out there, and the conversations such as this are really good. Our CIT training, where it could be just someone having a bad day, you know what I mean? Not even on the autism spectrum, but just someone having a really bad day emotionally. A lot of things are going on, and you'd be surprised what emotions, as you know, can do to people. So I think overall law enforcement has done a great job with working with people, trying to, you know, find ways to calm them down, maybe diversionary type thing. You know, I know I'm rambling a little bit.
What kind of advice would you give parents? Because everybody doesn't know the space,
Yeah.
right? So what kind of advice, Chief Spagnolo, Riddick, would you give to parents saying, you know, if your child encounters an officer and you know they like to hug and touch, this is what some things you can and should not do. So what kind of advice can you give a parent?
Yeah,
I'm gonna flip it back what I was starting to say before. Lieutenant made some really good points. I would ask you, because you're gonna know your child and your children much better than we are going to.
Right.
So we would ask you, what's the best thing for us and how to react? You know, the problem, I agree that training has come a long way with our personnel, but unfortunately, everyone's not trained and everyone doesn't have this. So at some point, I think if most officers would recognize that the person is on the spectrum where something isn't right, but if the individual continues and persists and continues to grab and the officer's retreating and trying to do diversions and that's not working and it becomes a physical altercation, you know, the officer is going to have to do something to get that individual off of them. So I would at least ask, and this is where your training comes in, you know, what would you recommend and how should we respond, our officers respond in a situation like that?
So I think Officer Mike gave some great advice in terms of a distraction. I think that sometimes if they're younger, you have to get down to their level and eye level because that's a comfort zone for them. So you might have to squat down to their level and talk to them. They may not look at you, but that's okay. You could say focus. So certain things like focus, things like that are helpful words. They're used to hearing those type of words in school. So those might be advantageous as well. Any parents want to give any other advice?
I like that you said that because I tell all the teachers as well certain key words to use with both my boys, and one of them is, I need you to focus. I need you to focus, and saying it over and over again. You know, that's a good one right there. Yeah, that type of situation or thought process to get to them.
Yeah, because like you like to say, focus on me, use your fingers. Yes, Chief.
And I think, you know, it's kind of the same advice, but again, if the parent is there, it's so important to identify that your child is on the spectrum for the officer. So in certain situations, like I think Lieutenant Connolly might have mentioned a little bit, like me, I'm a hugger. I don't mind if people touch me. You know, it took me 3 years to get Vern to hug me, but that's neither here nor there. So listen, some people don't mind it. Some people, police officers, not police officers, listen, some people just, they have a wall. They don't want to be touched. They have their space. So, you know, we're also dealing with that. Let's be realistic. You can be all the training in the world, but some people are just going to react a little differently if somebody tries to touch them or tries to hug them. And, you know, so it's important. Again, it's so important to identify if that chance opportunity is avails itself to a parent or a guardian that, hey, my child is on the spectrum. They mean no harm. They love police officers. They're interested in your shiny badge or, you know, whatever. And this is what you can do. Like you said, try to get down to eye level and you know, maybe make a distraction. You know, it does frighten me, you know, the whole gun thing and listening to the lieutenant talk about it and the whole role playing with that is concerning to me. You know, our officers are trained a certain way. And, you know, I'll be frank, I think that, you know, unless they absolutely knew, and even if they did know, and someone, especially a larger person, reached for the officer's gun, I'm fearful that the officer would use force to get away, you know, just push that person away from that gun and protect themselves, because that's how they're trained. They would bring their arm down, you know, and kind of flank their side and back off and move away, which may cause a ruckus. You know, it may have a reaction maybe where that person may want to be more intrigued and continue to go after the gun. It may scare the person and allow them to retreat. I don't know, but that's another great scenario
Right.
that should be trained on. But again, this is all under the assumption that the police officer is completely blind to the fact that this person that they're dealing with is on the spectrum. That's why, again, the training, looking for the cues, being able to recognize the situation, and then the person that's responsible, the parent or the guardian, making it known. Hey, officer, we mean no harm. My child loves police officers. He's on the spectrum.
So that's a good point. So the cues. So sometimes you, as Cyndi spoke about earlier, sometimes you don't know that person has autism. So one of the things that I can share with my situation with Chase, that you see him in the street, you may not know he has autism, but once you have a conversation with him, he's delayed. He's going to respond slowly and take his time, and he's going to seem like he's ignoring the question, and he's not. So those are one of the things that we also teach our officers, is that there's a delay. Our individuals on the spectrum will take some time to process things. If you're talking too fast, they're not going to catch every word. So those are some of the tips we try to share, is that if there's a delay, there might be indication that that person's on the spectrum. And so those tips are helpful to the officers as well, because it may not be that they're flinging, flapping their hands or running around and spinning or making loud noises. They may be very quiet, but just not respond to you the way you want them to respond to you in a timely manner. Yeah, Donna.
So my takeaway from this truly is that I need to speak up. That's like my big takeaway from this. And to even share, like, it's fine to share what things could and could not work. For example, if you say no to her, never a good thing. She honestly doesn't even know what a gun is. So she might be curious about it if she sees it, but she wouldn't, I don't think it's in her vocabulary, to be honest. So yeah, I think the big takeaway is also, I'm starting to feel now, I don't know why I never thought of this before. When she was little, there was this North Carolina group that used to make little like business cards that said, my child is autistic, or my child has autism. I can't remember what words, but whatever. And, she might be screaming or yelling, please don't worry, we've got it handled, kind of thing. And literally, I remember taking her out of, when she was little, I could pick her up, which was lovely. We would take her out of restaurants screaming, and literally my husband would be handing out these business cards while we were taking screaming child out, because we thought somebody would think that we were hurting her, or even taking her and she wasn't our child. So now I'm thinking it's not such a bad idea to do anyway. Like, I don't know why I didn't think of this.
So I have cards, because I have autism. I shared it with Cyndi. Chief Spagnolo, his team has I donated a bunch of cards. I could send you the documents, and you can have it printed out easily. And it looks very immature, has puzzle pieces on it. So when an officer does see that, they'll know right away that something's different. So I can share that with you as well. But I think the cards are handy. One of the things is that, again, as an individual going to grab something, what is the officer going to think? So, Cyndi, if you want to introduce the next topic.
Yes. So, Chief Riddick, could you discuss with us about the effectiveness of the crisis intervention training, and also what you have learned about de-escalating a mental health 911 call?
All right, thank you. A couple of things. First, just to set a foundation for some background. This training has come a long way, and you have to understand it's a seismic shift from the way I came on. Oh my gosh, back in 1993 or so, and Lieutenant Connolly, I'm not sure when he started in law enforcement. You have to understand, we were always taught in the academy then to meet force with force and to escalate. That was our training for years. If someone yells, well, you yell louder. If someone grabs you, then you take one step above. So in addition to that, let's think physiologically with our bodies, our God-given bodies. You know, you get excited when a situation happens and it's fight or flight. So our bodies are going to react a certain way just by genetics and everything else. So we have to understand that. And that's where the training comes in, which is come forward leaps and bounds, and to overcome that and to recognize it. So with the CIT training, the crisis intervention training, and there's different models and modes. The training we go through here in West Hartford is 40 hours. I heard Lieutenant Connolly mention that they have 2 weeks of training, and it might be, you know, something different. I'm not really sure. It's curriculum based. The really good thing is, and I heard Chief Spagnolo talk about this, is the introduction of role playing, as opposed to just sitting there and going through checking boxes and everything else. To actually role play and put yourself into real scenario based training has come across tremendously. We call in law enforcement verbal judo, learning how to speak and to be assertive without yelling, to say no and mean it without no, and it's like, no, we can't do that, or along those lines. De-escalation, which is now mandatory with the police accountability bill, that the recruits get in the academy now mandatory, and we're providing training. So all these things are helping, especially for those on the spectrum. You mentioned 911, and I'm actually cutting through just a little bit just for time. You know, in the past, many of the dispatchers did not have this training. So now we have dispatchers who are going to CIT training and getting this specialized training, how to de-escalate, ask the right questions when someone's calling and saying, acting erratic. Okay, what does erratic mean? What are they doing? What are some of the cues? Is there a weapon involved? Does the person seem to be in the right mental state? This is information that is now pumped out to our officers, which helps set the stage for again, if it's predictable, it can be preventable for our reaction, our response on scene. With the overall goal being to come to these situations, not to make arrests, but to provide an assessment and provide the assistance and help necessary to rectify and remedy the situation. I can go on longer, but I just want to give a quick answer and summary regarding that.
Thank you, Chief. So it looks like we have Justin here, and we have Chase. Hi, Justin. Hello, Chase. You're on mute, Chase.
Hey.
Thanks for joining us. So real quick, I'm going to just, since the Officer Harris is not here, so Chase, if an officer were to stop you, and we're going to do a scenario of this later on, and you don't know why they're stopping you and they ask you for your name, would you give your name to them? Go off mute, please.
I probably would. I might tell them, or maybe not.
Right.
Depends.
It depends, right? So that's the thing, right? So that's a tough one. He may or may not, depends on how he feels. And there's so much stuff on television and on social media telling you where you have certain rights, which our individuals do see these videos. I see these cop 3.0s, whatever they're called, that tell you that you have a right and you don't have to tell them your name unless there's probable cause and all that type of stuff. So to de-escalate the situation from the individual's perspective, they're learning all these things, what their rights are. What suggestion would you have for an individual on the spectrum if an officer were to stop them and then ask them for their name without knowing why?
And you looking from a police officer standpoint?
Yes.
Well, again, you would try to read a person if they're not going to tell you, to see if they're, if you could tell that they're maybe on the spectrum, or there might be a mental health crisis or whatever. Again, I don't want to say it's difficult, but because I'm going to say it bluntly, you get pulled over for motor vehicle stop, we have to identify you. I mean, we ask you for your license, registration, insurance. We need that. I mean, there could be other things going on. This could be you know, a missing persons or a wanted person, or we just don't know. But when, you know, again, we don't want to turn this into something it doesn't need to be, but we would expect them to hand us their ID. I can't expect someone to tell me, hey, I'm on the autism spectrum, but, you know, otherwise we're going to end up prolonging this. And granted, we might not, we're going to try our best not to elevate it, but we're going to have to figure out who this person is and identify this person.
That's a good question. So, yeah, response. So,
It's actually the law in a motor vehicle. It's a requirement. You must. Now, whether that's speaking or not, that's different. Just providing it would be providing your license, registration, insurance, and therefore your name would be on there in a motor vehicle. You don't have that luxury. Well, you can, but there's penalties for that.
That's good to know. Yeah.
Yeah, as opposed to what we call a walk-up or just an interview, a on the street contact. When we're just, hey, how are you? What's your name? It's a little different situation, absent reasonable suspicion or probable cause or something along those lines. This is that you ask a tricky question, Helen, and I sense the lieutenant's hesitancy to so I'm going to jump in the pool. We're going to give you the police officer answer. We're not going to give you the constitutional answer. We're going to say, well, if an officer comes up to you, you should give the information.
Yeah.
And what happens and where there's problems sometimes is, you know, people think they know the law, and they know, as you're watching these shows, sometimes they know part of the law, and then that gets them into trouble. Like Miranda. Oh, you got to read me my rights because I'm under arrest. That's not true. It's false. It's not accurate, and that's not what the law says. It must be custody and interrogation, which triggers Miranda, not just a mere arrest.
That's good to know, Chief. That's really good information. That's why I asked a tricky question.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you too, Chief,
know.
for being the being the hammer there. Thank you.
Jump in the pool. He jumped in the pool for you. So Justin, how are you doing today? It's good to see you.
Yeah.
So Justin, you're gonna introduce Lieutenant Connolly. You're gonna talk about your interaction with them and how you felt it was beneficial for you, if you don't mind.
Yep. Okay. So we just discussed his approach to supporting the autism community. He likes hugs.
So before Lieutenant Connolly he talks about that, do you want to talk about your experience when he came to meet with you and how you felt about that?
It was fun. It wasn't well. It was informative, and yeah.
Okay, Lieutenant Connolly. So explain what your approach to help individuals on the spectrum and their families.
Well, I mean, first of all, when Cyndi called me to talk about possibly doing a meet, you know, I've met a lot of people through my career. It was great, really, you know, for her to reach out and be proactive. And we talked and discussed meeting Justin, and we arranged it, and it went very, very well. I was excited to do it. I learned a lot by just sitting and talking with Justin. He's a great individual. He's smart. You know, we had a nice talk just about police officers and not to be afraid to approach a police officer. And, you know, if he ever needed help, we're here to help him. Justin, I did give you a patch. Do you still have your police patch that I gave you?
Yep.
Yeah. So it was very nice. I mean, I appreciate the fact that Cyndi took the time to think about that at the call, because, you know, sometimes, you know, other than seeing people out on the street, but this was really, it was touching. I thought it was a great idea. It made me feel good. And I believe that Justin, Cyndi, and your husband and your other children, you know, appreciated that. I did. You welcomed me in, you know, and I don't know. I thought it was nice. And I hope Justin did learn something from our talk, and I think he knows that I'm always here, and like myself or any other police officers, we're here to help if needed. And you know, I don't know, not to keep going on and on, but
No, so that's great, Lieutenant Connolly. So what you did was very, very appreciative of the family. I know, talking with Cyndi, and every department can't do that. I know the city of Waterbury, I can't imagine every officer could go to everybody's house. But one of the things that we do recommend for parents is to bring your child down to the police station to give them a face, introduce them to the police department so they have a face and may know if they get that call. So you want to have a relationship. And one of the things that in Waterbury, we do have the Waterbury Police Athletic League. And so the officers are establishing relationships from a young age with individuals all the way up through adults. And so that, I think that's key, is having as much of a relationship as you can with your local police department. Even if they don't have the vulnerable citizens forum or computer systems, bring that child down there, have a conversation, have them meet your local police officers, because when you have a relationship, it makes a big difference. And so we do appreciate the fact that you did go and meet with Justin and Cyndi and her family.
Helen, I would like to add something too. I know, like, at least here in Wethersfield, and I know Lieutenant Connolly, we're gonna have the National Night Out, right, this weekend here in Wethersfield.
Next Tuesday, yep.
Yep. Okay. It's a great opportunity for families in the community to meet and interact with police officers in a safe environment, in a casual environment, and, you know, for kids, you know, to know that police officers are there to help us, you know, and hopefully help, you know, the kids feel comfortable, you know, with the officers as they grow up. And, you know, so yeah, it's really good, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, so I'm very jealous, because I wanted to have a national night out in Waterbury some years ago, but then some chief went to another city to be a chief, and so we didn't have it. So
Yeah.
but you know, so
You have a great chief in Waterbury right now.
I know, I do. So she refreshed my memory when we were talking about. I'm like, gosh, Donna, I forgot all about that. So for any parent, it's something called National Night Out, and you can look it up online, and you can register your city and with your local officers, and it is a great opportunity to network with each other. So thanks, Cyndi, for sharing that with us, and Wethersfield for putting that on as well. And I'm sure she's, yeah, sure.
Quick question. You
Sure.
had mentioned, and I don't disagree, but you had mentioned that it might be difficult for police departments to come to every child on the spectrum's house. I would, like, Waterbury has a community relations division. West Hartford has a community relations division. There are a lot of police departments that have community relations divisions. And I would also argue that if you were to call and schedule a visit, you would think, like, how many times in the course of a year would you get a phone call like that? But so it's not like you're going to get inundated with, like, you know, 1,000 of these calls. So if you would call and ask to speak to a supervisor, probably a patrol supervisor, because some places don't have community relations divisions, I'm sure you can schedule a 10, 15-minute visit in the course of a day of a police officer to stop by.
Thank you, Vern. I really appreciate that. That's really good information. I really appreciate that very much. So, so we're going to go on to a little bit of a tougher question, which, you know, we talked about this before, but, you know, we have to have a real conversation about some of our fears. So Lieutenant Connolly, this was going to be my question for you that we talked about in terms of, what would happen if you get a call from a family, a 911 call, and an individual with special needs or on the spectrum has a knife. So what would you do in that situation, or what are some mitigation measures or anything that you could help us out to understand from a police officer's perspective of when you have to encounter that type of situation?
So as you said, that's like I mean, it's an easy topic to just say outright, but sometimes it's not that easy to hear. Anytime a dangerous situation happens, our blood pressure raises, our tunnel vision becomes narrower. There's things that happen to the body that, there's, as Chief Riddick had mentioned, there's things that we used to use terms years ago, like fight or flight. What are you going to do? Sometimes you can't control. Sometimes training can control it, but sometimes the body does funny things, and there's psychological studies and all that stuff. But obviously, if we get called to a home and there's some sort of weapon involved, and even if it's a knife or any kind of weapon, the more information our dispatchers receive, the better, because they're going to put that information out to the officers that are going there. Once we get there, if people are outside, and we can say, is there anyone left in the house? Are there things like, is the person in the house? Anyone left in the house? Is there, did you see a knife? What kind of knife? Is it a nail file, or is it a big long kitchen knife? Or a gun, or whatever, a baseball bat. So we might, those are helpful things. If no one's in the house, we're not going to run into the house. If that's the only person in there right away, we're gonna start discussing a plan, getting other officers there, getting folks away from the area, and having them possibly talk to another officer while officers are creating like a perimeter and making a decision. Okay, we're not going to rush into this because they're the only ones in there, or maybe we do have to rush in because there's someone in there that could be harmed. Communication is key. When we go back to if now we realize it's an autistic person and we have distance and space and time, we're going to start trying to talk to them. And back to the, we still have to protect ourselves. I mean, it's a dangerous situation for us or someone else, but hopefully we have time and communication and get the right people there and can talk this person down. There's times when the luxury isn't there to do that. And unfortunately, we could be put in a position where we have to defend ourselves or defend or save another person. And, I know we had talked about this before. Again, it's not the most favorite subject, because it's not a glamorous conversation, but if the person presented a threat to the officer or someone else, we may have to use certain types of force. If we have what we call like two officers, and we have other options as far as like a less lethal option. You've seen tasers, or we have bean bags. We might be able to do that, but if it's an immediate threat, and we'll get into the 30-foot rule. I mean, we call it used to be the 21-foot rule. That was always the big number, but it's been proven that even that distance is an unsafe distance to be, where someone could still get to an officer or a person, even if they were shot. There's other measures, as far as tools we have, cover or a shield that we could block. But typically, if someone's charging us at 30 feet, and they're intending to get to us, they're more than likely going to get to us. But at that level, that we would have no choice but to use a deadly force. It's something we don't want to do. We hope that doesn't happen, but the things in the beginning that would help us are, information. If they're in the house by themselves, that's great. Even if they have a knife, we have time. We can take our time, and we can work on options. Our best case scenario is talking someone out to come out of the house, and even if it's just sit on the say there's a front porch or whatever. And I'll use an example. This was the other day on our day shift. We had a call, and it was adult brother and sister. The brother was choking the sister. She got out of the house. We get there, he's in the house, and there's unknown weapons in the house, so he's not coming out. So we knew no one else was in the house. The officers set up outside. They started communicating, through the, yelling into the door was partially open. We had another officer working with a sister, talking to her. She was outside the house. He eventually came outside and sat on the front steps, and he sat there for about 45 minutes. And our officers just stood at a safe distance. They could tell he didn't have any weapons, but they talked to him, and then eventually he just got up, and they told him to get on his knees, and we handcuffed him, and we sent him to the hospital. He had some mental, we know of this house. We've been there numerous times. He had some mental health issues, was not on his medication. That one worked out well. The time is hugely important. If we can take the time, we can communicate, talk, slow things down, but sometimes we don't, and then we have to act appropriately. So best case scenario is information. Give us information up front, all the information you can. What's going on? Is there a weapon? What kind of weapon? Everyone's out of the house. And then we can hopefully slow things down and talk them out. If not, then we have to, we can't afford saying, oh, we're gonna take a knife, a stab to see if it's real. We don't have that luxury of,
Right.
So
Yeah.
I know it's a tough topic to talk about. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, I know how I would handle it, but I still. Nobody wants to get involved if they can help it, but it does happen.
It does. And I appreciate you taking the question on, the tough question, but it was a conversation that we need to have because we see quite a bit of this going on. And parents also have to understand as well that the officer does have to protect themselves. They also have to go home to their family. And so it is tough, but you gave some great advice, and I really appreciate the transparency and you discussing some mitigation measures, but in the end, you do have to protect yourself. So I appreciate you taking on that tough question so much. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, Helen, if I can add,
Sure.
first, LT, great job. That's not an easy question, so good kudos to you for that. Also keep in mind, let's go under the assumption that it's a family member in this situation. And this comes to our side a little bit. If you're calling us for assistance for a family member who's on the spectrum or has some other type of issues who you know very well, and it's got to that point that you have to call us, that already is a huge indicator how serious this is, because you're not just going to call us at that time. So that's, and we know that going in. And sometimes when force is used, and sometimes, lethal force, people forget that. Again, to give law enforcement, public safety some kudos, how we would handle this today. And again, there's no always, never always. there's exceptions, but
Right.
across the board, how we handle these calls today versus how we would handle these calls, 15, 20, 25 years ago, we've made progress. We're not 100% there. Because unfortunately, every police department doesn't have beanbags. We do, fortunately. Doesn't have tasers. We do. And in some situations, even a canine could be utilized in that situation. We happen to have that, but other places don't. And one other point that the lieutenant alluded to, and Helen, you had mentioned, protect ourselves. Many times, it's not just us. It's protect ourselves or others. If a person flees with a knife and we have to utilize some type of force, well, why did you have to do that? He was running away. Well, to do what? And if there's children around the corner or another group and we don't know, and maybe that the person might just run by, but we don't have that luxury of waiting and guessing. and it's not easy. And when we go through scenario-based training, these are not easy decisions. So you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. So if the officer doesn't take appropriate action, and then a 13-year-old, is there and gets stabbed, now we're criticized for not taking that, using force.
Yeah.
So no easy answer.
No, it's not an easy answer. It's not, but it's a conversation that it was good to have. And so thank you for adding to that, Chief Riddick. I appreciate that as well. So yeah, it's not an easy answer. In all these different situations is always tough, but we all have to try what we can do. And us being honest and transparent and having these great conversations like today I think it's going to help others, like it's helped me talking to others as well. So I would like to do like a quick little round table to get, if anybody else has anything else to add. So Donna, if you'd like to go first, please.
Can get a little loud in my house, so I just had myself on mute. So for me personally, this was it was a little bit calming, and I have like a little bit more peace of mind about the reality of what to expect. It's very nice to know that there's education out there now. I do have to go back now though and check. Years ago when my daughter was like 5 or so, I know I went to the police department with one of our teachers actually, and we did tell them we had somebody in the house with autism, and they said that if we called 911, the information would pop up. But that was like 20 something years ago, and now I'm wondering if that's even current. So yeah, I'm thinking more now about being prepared. I need to get more prepared, and that will also, I think, alleviate a lot of anxiety. I think that it's really not all on the police officers. I think that as parents, and actually now I'm going to have a few conversations with some of the caretakers that we have also, just make sure that we're all on the same page. And the key obviously is to keep her safe, but it's always been my concern to keep people around us safe as well. So this is a really helpful conversation. Now I have to get my little tuition gear and do a few things. So
Thank you so much, Donna.
Here I always thought I was so proactive, but okay, let's.
I know when we're advocates, we think we know everything, but no, there's so much more for us to learn. I'm still learning myself. There's so much more that I could do with Chase, and sometimes we beat ourselves up over it, but the point is that we're learning and we're going to make some changes to thanks, Chase, the thumbs up, and make things better. So
about the spider. Yes, Mike.
I guess I could be outside and my son might see a spider and run out of the house, and I wouldn't know it. So, and in that case, if he went somewhere else or went into the woods or to the neighbors and then got picked up, and just in that kind of situation, it's not the parent's fault not knowing where or what happened. It's a situation that happens, and unfortunately sometimes a child is older, yet they have these reactions that a 3-year-old might have. So it's just a scenario I think she wanted me to share that could be out there to think about. It's not always the parent's fault, I guess, to say. My son might see a spider and run out of the house, and I wouldn't know it. So and in that case, if he went somewhere else or went into the woods or to the neighbors and then got picked up, and just in that kind of situation, it's not the parent's fault not knowing where or what happened. It's a situation that happens, and unfortunately sometimes a child is older, yet they have these reactions that a 3-year-old might have. So it's just a scenario I think she wanted me to share that could be out there to think about. It's not always the parent's fault, I guess, to say.
Even underneath our watchful eye, our loved ones under the spectrum, they tend to wander, or something might scare them. They may run from the house. We may be busy doing something, and we may not realize that they're gone, and somebody could see them walking in the streets or they're acting certain behaviors and call the police, and the police will come and say, oh, wait, why aren't you watching your child? So, we're hoping that officers understand that it's not always us not watching our child. It's just sometimes they wander, they're quick, and we think they're safe. They're watching TV while we're doing something else, and we may not know they're gone. So we're hoping that officers could see that, if that happens, to bring them home and have the conversation with us, or have somebody else come have a conversation with us, versus thinking that, we weren't good parents and maybe a possible arrest of us. So we're just hoping that they understand it's not only the individual with special needs on the spectrum, but it's also what the parent needs to go through in terms of that individual on the spectrum. Like I said to you, Chase wandered off when we were in Florida. I mean, somebody could have saw that as us being bad parents. It's like, no, we thought each other had him. So we just hope that they're conscientious of that, knowing that it could definitely happen to us. Chase disappeared. He was right next to me in the store. I went to turn to pay the lady and he was gone. And I was like, and I was looking all over the place for him, and I finally found him underneath a rack of clothes. At that time, not knowing that the lights were a sensory for him in the store, he's underneath the rack of clothes hiding, and he wouldn't respond to me because he didn't respond when we called him. So was that me being a bad parent? No, it's just that I turned my head to pay and he was gone. So we just hope that chiefs, that lieutenant, that you keep that in mind, that also parents, we're not perfect and we're trying, but these situations happen to us quite often more than a typical person would happen to.
I will tell you, our daughter actually, when she was little, at 4 o'clock in the morning in the pouring rain, decided to climb out our window onto our back little wooden thing deck, and she was bowling with her little bowling thing in the pouring rain in her pajamas. And thank goodness our neighbors called us, and I thought our neighbor had lost her mind when she said, we can hear Rachel outside. I'm like, whatever, okay. So I went, and the back door was locked. So I thought, well, I don't get it. But then I could hear her, and she literally climbed out the window. So, they do what they want to do when they want to do it.
Right.
There's really not a lot of thought there. And she had very little language at that point. So when I sort of like shockingly said, Rachel, what are you doing? She said, I am bowling and it is raining. It's like, okay, come inside. So I'm so grateful our neighbor had the sense to call us, and they didn't call the police, because I'm sure we would have looked like the worst parents on the planet at that moment. And she was a bolter. For a long time, like if we walked places, she would just fly. It was horrible. Now, we've trained her, and as best as we think we could, though, you never know. She sees a puppy, 50-50. Maybe she'll stay with us, maybe she won't. So I think that is an important thing to know, that we're doing our best as parents, but the truth is I can't mind read her.
Right. And we were fortunate. We had a team of, so our nieces were like, my husband has 5 nieces, and they were like our team. So I knew they had Chase, so they surround him to make sure they has hands. So it was like it had to be a team effort. So it's, if you don't have that team, it's tough as well. So Cyndi, do you want to share anything in closing?
I'm just really thankful for today. I really learned a lot
Get a little closer
as well. Oh,
Yeah.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No, I'm just very thankful for today. I've learned a lot. I appreciate, the parents sharing, a little bit about their children, but also Lieutenant Mike Connolly, who did, come out to our home and took the time to, meet with my family and I, and kind of put Justin at ease and my mind at ease a little bit. I wanted my son to have a familiar face with the Wethersfield Police Department. And Lieutenant Connolly made that so much easier. He took the time to explain a little bit about himself and the work that he does here in town. So we appreciate him very much. And, to all of the chiefs that are, here today, thank you very much for what you're doing in each of your communities and for speaking with us tonight. This has been really informative. It's great information. And at the end of the day, we're all here learning and helping each other. And I'm really thankful for it.
Thank you, son. Well said. I can't even follow that one up at all. All right, Chief Riddick.
Thank all of you. My prayers are with you. I believe you're doing God's work. The patience that's bestowed upon you. Just God bless you for what you're doing, you and your families and your children. I think what we've heard today, first of all, what are our takeaways? Our takeaways is it's a partnership. And oftentimes what you'll see is, people, well, the police need to do this or blah, blah, blah. No, it's the true essence of policing, if you will, is community interaction, community policing, us working together, which we're doing today. I think it's an obligation for law enforcement, public safety, to continue to learn. But I also think it's an obligation on the parents to learn and to educate. And if we work together and feed off each other in a symbiotic relationship, we'll have progress. Action steps, I know my takeaways is one, I think we ran out of the blue envelopes. I know the Connecticut Police Chiefs Association had those. Two, I'm going to follow up with Helen on those cards that we can hand out. We don't have those here. And three, continue the training that we are doing, but to make sure we don't, what happens is, and the lieutenant can probably attest to this too, you get the silo effect. Well, it's just the CIT officers, they handle it. No, it's the department wide. And our goal is to get, right now we have 50 out of our 130 police officers, well, budgeted police officers who are CIT trained, is to get the entire police department trained. So that's our goal. So thank you all, and it's been a wonderful evening.
Thank you, Chief. All right,
Thank
Lieutenant
you.
Connolly.
Hi, everyone, thank you for having me. Helen, great program for putting this together. Cyndi started this by calling me. I'm just really happy to be part of this today. I think there was good communication. Sometimes the difficult topics, are kind of the ones that are you don't really want to talk about, but I think it's important to understand, and those are the last resort, the last thing we want to do. But the communication is great. Thanks to the other chiefs as well for being part of this, and I'm humbled, and God bless all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Lieutenant Justin, you want to say anything?
I wasn't able to stay for long because I had another therapy call right before this that I'm a part of. I do a group thing with other kids on the spectrum, so I had to come in a little late. But from what I gathered, it seemed like it was pretty helpful. You know what I mean? Like, it was nice.
Thank you. Chase, what about you? You came a little bit late too. You're on mute, just so you know. You want to say any final words or?
It was nice to be here and listen to the stories.
Thank you.
Yep.
I'm not sure if Chief Spagnolo is still on, because he did have another appointment. So he's on mute, but I just don't think he's available. And so I want to just thank everyone. This is such a blessing to have this and have you all here. I'm trying not to get emotional. This was so important to me to have this, and important to me that the people in front of me are just, I love what you guys did today. So I'm just from my heart, thank you so much. I know sometimes I could be like very strong about what I want to get done, and I'm very passionate, but you guys still stick with me, and I appreciate that. So thank you so much, especially, Chief Riddick. I have to give him extra props for that. Great conversation. Thank you so much. And you all have a very blessed day. So I'd like to thank Donna Cohen, Chief Vern Riddick, Cyndi Cruz, Justin Cruz, Mike, Chief Spagnolo, Lieutenant Connolly, and Chase.
Mike is good. Mike is good.
And God bless you all. Thank you.
Bye. Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you all. Good night.